Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for being here today at the final conference of the ISA project. It's an honor for me to introduce this important conference, and it's a pleasure to see so many participants today. I hope to see you soon in person when we have passed this bad time. My name is Bianca Baron. I am the Vice Director of the CNCE, the Joint National Committee for Building Workers Fund, the Italian sectoral funds for construction workers, known in Italy as Casse Edili. Before starting, I want to bring greetings of our presidency, Carlo Tristini and Antonio Di Franco. And now, as a CNC, we are very proud of the gained results of ISA project. And for this reason, I'd like to thank all people who have contributed to these great results. Then let me thank all partners, Notus for Spain, Universities Lisboa through ISCTE-IUL for Portugal, IR Share and UTCF for France, Construction Chamber of Bulgaria, Minister of Labor and Social Justice for Romania, and Budulani for Poland. Then thank you to Fondazione Brodolini and AEIP. I want to thank you for your strong efforts in this project. I hope I didn't forget anybody. As you know, after it started in 2019, ISA project suffered the pandemic in the middle of the research and in the middle of the dissemination activities. This has meant great difficulties, but in spite of this, we are here today, unfortunately not in presence, but not less on the important results of the project. As you know, ISA project is the third project in the field of posting workers won by CNCE as the leader partners with the other partners, with the support of Fondazione Brodolini with scientific coordination and of IEP for dissemination activities. The previous project, always in the field of posting workers, which have represented an important base of study also for ISA, are Post Lab on the topic of administrative cooperation in the framework of the posting workers, and the EU Post Lab to developing experiences of the administrative cooperation and enhancing the access to the information on in the framework of posting workers. This project were carried out by CNC, Fondazione Brodolini, IEP, and with the partnership of the different member states. Today, we are also very happy because as partnership, we have just won another important European project, always in the field of the posting workers. But this time, the project is on the posting of workers. The name of the project is AMEX, European Market Environment in the Construction Sector. And the consideration behind the project are that it is essential for the European economy, for the protection of workers and the wider health of society, that we understand how posted workers have been affected by the measures introduced by member states to fight the pandemic, and how the obstacles to posting can be overcome, and how workers can be better protected in the future. Then in these years, thanks to this interesting project, we have addressed the important issues concerning all aspects that can ensure the protection of companies and workers during posting workers. And we hope that this work will stimulate the signing of other interesting agreements, especially for mutual right recognition about employers and employees, and for the administrative cooperation between public authorities. In fact, as you know, the goals of the ISA project are to promote and reinforce transnational cooperation between public authorities, paritarian institutions, and social partners in workers in the construction sector. The project, as you know, targets the setup and the promotion of the information sharing agreements meant to enforce rules and social security in terms of employment applicable to posting workers. As you know, there is the website, ISA Project EU, that hosts a country-by-country contextual analysis and through assessment of selected agreements in the shape of guidelines, meant to explore the process and the key features in a way to inspire stakeholders. The final report will be published on the website by the end of March. In this scenario, finally, I would like to stress once again the importance of the role of the sectoral funds and of the bilateral fund, which by guaranteeing important protection for companies and workers at national level allow us to transfer this experience also at an international level. Now, I won't say anymore. I leave beginning. I want to thank all the speakers present today for their contribution, important contributions. I thank the interpreters. I thank all for your attention. Then I leave the floor to Feliciano, who I would particularly thank for his precious competence. And thank you, Feliciano. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Bianca, for the introduction and the compliments. I'm happy to introduce the findings and proposal of the ISA projects today. I'm not sure you can see my screen. Okay, now you should. Okay, I'm happy to share with you the findings and proposal of the ISA project. First of all, as Bianca mentioned, this is the third project in a row of a partnership which has been growing over the years and which has contributed to this excellent which has started to work on the topic of posting of workers together in 2016 with the PostLab project, then went over to the EU PostLab, and now with the ISA project. So there is a continuity between this project, and I will particularly stress some of the findings of the EU PostLab project completed by the end of 2018, because I think they're pretty much relevant for the SON project, the one we are closing today. So in order to understand better how administrative cooperation works, how data sharing works, and how it can be improved, actually we asked all partners to screen data sets in their country according to a set of variables. We wanted to inquire variables which have to do basically with employment relationships and with head count of companies, income of companies, all data which are relevant in terms of coordination of social security or for the enforcement directive, so in the field of posting of workers. We did so in a view also to help functionary to have a kind of map to know where they can find the information, and this can help them direct their questions, or hopefully in the few cases where these databases are available online, also to start making their own search if they find some companies from abroad or some worker posted from abroad and they want to have some information. Yeah, those are all the database that we screened in the countries covered. And we also assessed these databases thanks to a network of researchers in the covered countries. And okay, of course, you can find the detailed result of the assessment country by country in the website I'm going to share at the end of this presentation. But the main findings are that there is some data matching at national level between some different databases, but this seems to be still underdeveloped. Except for some cases, we can say in Belgium, we found out even the use of artificial intelligence actually to detect fraud in the field, more generally fiscal field, in the employment field, and so forth. At the same time, we saw that the adoption of rules on joint responsibility can actually trigger, even among companies, the use of private software or databases to check the regularity of their subcontractors, even if in this respect, probably some inputs will follow also now to ease this particular role. And on the other side, we were quite aware that in some cases, these databases may not be up to date or may have incorrect information. So in our final recommendation, also we warned stakeholders, functionaries to rely on administrative data only to a certain extent, as the risk is of having only some formal checks and to miss what is the reality going on in the field. So the final findings, the final recommendation were actually structured along 3 strands. So is access to information for employers and workers on their duties and rights, and also actually is the information flows, for instance, about declarations on posting or other documents that might be submitted to enforcement authorities or to social security institutions. At the same time, we found out that, again, there are some difficulties in information sharing, even at national level in some cases. So it's important actually to improve information sharing really within a country's border before to be able to have effective international cooperation in place. In this respect, we also suggest to improve the availability of statistics, of course, respecting privacy, also for stakeholders and researchers, because this can help actually improve the knowledge we have on posting and of the related phenomena and trends. The latest trend was the one probably we'll hear more about today from the new European Labour Authority, because some of the recommendations were linked to improving transnational administrative cooperation, both by relying on new digital tools, but also by developing some field activities like joint training, joint inspection, workshops, and I'm happy to say these suggestions are at the core now of European policies. For what concerns ISA, as Bianca anticipated, we have been studying a set of agreements at the international level. That's a screenshot from the webpage of WISAS, where you can find all the outputs delivered so far. In particular, we analyzed and assessed 11 agreements, which can be divided depending on the core actors. So we have 4 agreements where the core actors are labor inspectors, or there are 4 where we have ministries of labor, at time actually involving also labor inspectorates. And in the end, we have agreements between sectoral funds, one of them actually being quite peculiar because it involved the German holiday pay fund, Saugabau, not only holiday pay actually, and the Social Security Institute, the Polish ZUS. So if we have a look at the core features of the agreement, it's interesting to see that for what concerns those entered by labor inspectorates, much attention is paid, of course, on joint inspections and on information sharing on legislation and on companies, workers also, and violations by these companies. It's very interesting to see that whereas much debate, especially at academical level, but also at political level, actually focus on what? Focus on the topics of wage, remuneration, non-compliance with the payment of minimum wage, or now of the concept of remuneration, problems with letterbox companies, and so forth. Here, the focus is on one that probably is the most immediate and immediate consequences of violation, which are accidents at work. So at least when you are not paid a minimum wage or you're not paid social security contributions, there's a way out. After accidents, many times there is not a way out. And that's probably why these agreements have a focus on that, both in terms of prevention of accidents and of sharing information on those which occurred in a country. So for which the payment of the benefits or for the sanction may be responsible also the authority from the sending country. You can see that joint training appear quite underrepresented, but the case is that those are agreements that might be quite general and then have some more detailed activities detailed, for instance, in action plans. So it's not always easy to distinguish between the different activities. And many times, actually, the information sharing or legislation may end up in some kind of more or less formalized joint training for inspectors. If at the agreements where the ministries of labor are the main actor, the focus is slightly different because there is much attention actually on joint training And also, I would say on promotional activities, so activities to facilitate access to information. For instance, brochures in different languages, or helping each other, like developing website or information materials on rights, and that is to be observed, or making joint promotional campaigns on working conditions, on terms of employment to be respected. It's interesting to see in some cases, especially in the agreements entered by the Bulgarian Ministry of Labor, we have as a goal, there is explicitly the goal of sharing good practices and even of seconding some stuff. So those cases are particularly interesting, especially the one about sharing good practices in the field of enforcement, legislation on labor law, for instance, because I mean, once you are here, once there is a governance actually in place to improve cooperation, why not to use the same platform also to share other tools, good practices in a mutual way. If we go to the governance, actually we have excluded some agreements because at the beginning, of course, we had the screening. We have excluded some agreements which seem to have quite a poor governance, and in the end resulted also in lack of actions. In these cases, instead, we have really the agreement entails usually some kind of follow-up in terms of annual meetings or meetings upon request by the parties. In some cases, there is also a program that they have to set at the beginning of the year, or instead an evaluation plan at the end of the period, so that when they meet, they can see which concrete steps were made in the field of cooperation. Another interesting element is that in some cases, especially in Spain or in other situations where there are strong flows of posted workers between some cross-border regions, the agreement themselves includes local inspectorates, or they include other institutions which have relevant data. And of course, in this case, the idea is to have, for instance, inspectorate or social security institutions on board, because this way is then easier to get access to data useful for the cooperation to be effective. In the end, we are known for that among other projects also on posting. We always put some attention on the role of sectoral funds, which are private institutions, but in most of the cases established on a paritarian basis. There you have some agreements in place. We studied the one between Germany and France and Italy, Italy and Germany. Basically, this agreement exempts companies to pay holiday funds, holiday pay, which is intermediated by the fund together actually before the wage elements, from the host country rule. So these funds, these wage elements are paid to the fund in the sending country in a way similar to what happened in the field of social security coordination, with social contribution being paid in the sending country. That's a difference, a very important difference, because this is allowed only as far as the companies are in line with payments due to the funds in the sending country. Whereas in the case of the AR1 form, that's an important point to stress, this is allowed only as far as a company is affiliated, but it might be not regular actually with payments. And actually in Italy, we have also one of the practices, an interesting practice at national level with the CNCE, so the coordinating body of the sectoral funds, actually sharing information with national social security institutions to make sure this happens, so the companies pays both contribution to the sectoral funds and social security contribution. Whereas in Germany, we have another example of interesting agreement with these funds sharing information with the customs authority on the preventive declaration on posting, and this way making sure each worker's post to the construction sector in Germany is then registered to SOGABAU. And we have a similar agreement on the one of Italy that Italy developed at national level, at international level between SOGABAU and ZUS, that makes sure that social security contributions are paid in Poland on contributions for holiday fund submitted in Germany. So, first of all, exploring similar pathways for cooperation between sectoral funds and the public institution is for sure one of the proposals that emerged from the project. The other key proposals emerging concerns, it might sound trivial, but that's it. We need international cooperation to be addressed as a political priority at national level, meaning also earmarking resources for joint training, resources for joint inspections, resources for all the collateral activities, the additional activities that ministries or inspector or institutions should put in place. it's very important to stress again the role of a structured governance for the success of agreement, a structured governance in terms of process of cooperation, but also in terms of involving the right actors which own the relevant data. So labor inspectorates, but also social security institutions and other actors in the arena being relevant, possibly also at local level, depending on the division of competencies in the country. A corollarium of that is that there is a proper data sharing at national level, as I already said in EU Post-Lab. There is this paradox that sometimes international cooperation stops because of problems in country level cooperation. And finally, since we are there, since there is already cooperation platforms in place, why not, again, as we said before, why not to use these platforms to share also good practices and trigger some process of mutual learning in the field of, for instance, taking undeclared work. So all these, all the outputs, the proposals are on the projects on the fifth on this website. On the fifth link, you can find information of reports from EU Post-Lab project. So mostly the assessment of databases that I presented before. And on the second link that I will share in the chat, on the chat in a minute, you will find all the guidelines of the ISA project and very soon the final report. That said, I leave the floor to Francesca and I wait for the other inputs of today's events.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Feliciano, and also previously Bianca for their introduction. And thanks to you, Feliciano, for having presented the main findings of this project, but also of the previous one over which this project was building, as well as the proposals that the consortium presented as a way forward. And that said, I think that the best way to discuss how to bring this administrative cooperation forward is to hear the initiative that are actually already in place in Europe, how they were developed, and most importantly, how they function. So the scope of this first panel will be indeed that of presenting the current collaborations with a special focus on one aspect of this, that of data, and how administrative authorities use that to foster and to make this collaboration work. In fact, I think that we all agree that in the 21st century, it's almost unrealistic to speak about collaboration between whatever entities without speaking about sharing of data and doing that in a digital way. The use of data we saw also in the previous webinars that this consortium organized is considered very positively also by the let's say the end users of these somehow tools, which are the employers and the employees, because this allows them to look to share, but also to provide information in a faster and more efficient way. In spite of that, as we will hear in a second, there are still quite some obstacles and also different speeds. As Feliciano has already anticipated some of them. Sometimes there are differences within the same countries, between authorities, and even more between European countries. So without further ado, I will now give the floor to the first three project partners from Portugal, Romania, and Spain. They will share the status quo in their respective countries for what concerns the collaborations that they have in place, and also the use of digital tool to share the information. I also remind you that during the presentations, as you did already posted in the chat, you can use the chat box to write your question, or alternatively, you can also ask them at the end of the presentations. So the first to take the floor will be Rui Arrifana, who is a labor inspector at the Autoridade para as Condições de Trabalho, AECTE. AECTE is a public authority, and its task is that of promote working condition and social policies across Portugal by means of monitoring and enforcing activities. Rui will speak in Portuguese, so I will already invite the non-Portuguese speakers to activate the translation function. So Rui, please, you have 10 minutes as of now.
Obrigado.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, if that's the case. I thank you for allowing me to speak Portuguese. The words will come out better. I thank the invitation to the Authority for Working Conditions to be present in this final conference of the ISA project. It is a great pleasure, institutionally and personally. It's always a pleasure for me to speak about the work we do. So I greet you all virtually. Unfortunately, I would also like to be in Rome, as a colleague said a while ago. I will try to stick to the 10 minutes. It will not be easy, even though I am usually brief. Well, the slides that will be available, I'm not worried so much about what is written, just stress a few important items that are at the core of this first panel. Now, based on the agreement between Portugal and France, that is in the guidelines, and Feliciano mentioned here today, it's in the guidelines of the ISA project. We held this concerted inspection between Portugal and France. The difference here is how original and timely it was to work with European Labour Authority at a pilot stage of these actions led by the European Authority, the ELA. Here you have a more recent history of the cooperation between Portugal and France. But let me stress that these change of experiences and has been going on for decades. For more than 30 years, the Portuguese inspectorate and the French inspectorate cooperate. And this is important to stress. Why do we have this type of cooperation with certain inspectorates and not others? Well, we have privileged relations with France, with Belgium, with Italy. Why not with Germany? Why not with Austria? Except for some specific works that we carry out with those inspections, but it is totally different, the type of work we have been developing with France, for instance. And why? Because we have to get to know each other. We must trust each other. We must work permanently together. And this makes the difference when we speak about inspections. And this is the first thing I'd like to stress when we talk about cooperation between public administrations. And why do we have true cooperation with ones and not with the others? Well, the possibilities for cooperation increase exponentially when we do have this trust as we do with France, working in different sectors of activity, between inspectors, joint visits, and we will.
Infelizmente, ele repete-se ao longo da Europa, em diferentes zonas geográficas, com diferentes países. Next. A primeira parte deste caso foi tratada em França, onde estavam duas empresas de trabalho temporário portuguesas do setor da construção, e onde foram identificados variedíssimos trabalhadores em diversas empreitadas, principalmente na região da Aquitaine, junto a Bordeaux e a Biarritz, sítios mais conhecidos, e entre outros. Os principais dados pela inspeção francesa. Próximo slide, por favor. Next slide, please.
Rui?
Sim.
Sorry for interrupting. I think we had a little issue with the translation because it stopped being translated in English, I read in the chat. So I would just give a few seconds to the technicians to address that. Thank you very much.
Okay.
You may go on. Rui, you may go on.
Okay, good.
Please, go ahead.
Sure, thanks.
Yes,
Rui.
please, yes. So, as I was saying, that the first part of this example happened in France, and the colleagues in France found two temporary Portuguese companies from the construction sector. They identified several workers, Portuguese workers, and from third countries, namely in Aquitaine, near Bordeaux, and the coast near Biarritz, just to give you two examples. And what were the two or the main issues found by the inspection in France? Well, first of all, there was a passage from one company to the other. These were hundreds of workers, and at a certain point, these workers did no longer know who their employer was, because they came from one company to another. So trying to overcome the temporary law that has detached work or posted worker. Another difficulty was the fact that these two companies, Portuguese temporary companies, never showed up at the inspection meetings that were required by the inspectors as well. So never attended the meetings. Well, ELA had a very relevant role because it made easy or made possible the dialogue between France and Portugal through IT support. So we had several meetings, previous meetings, before we took actions in Portugal, and I'll refer to that in a second. And we wanted to try new tools that were at the time being developed, but they are now being used by ELA, new tools that could help and contribute for the success of this case. Well, initially, we had foreseen a common action. The French inspectors come to Portugal and follow our work in Portugal, but through the pandemic, that was not possible. And so there was a distant work, but there was a first intervention between France and Portugal jointly, but in distance. And at the same time, we had these meetings, and we were trying to gather all the necessary documentation and all the information. We went on cooperating in the formal means and channels through the EMITA or EMI between GGT and ACT in February 2020. There was an exchange of information. And so we had these two channels of communication between France and Portugal. On the second part, and this is the next slide, you will see that, there it is. Well, the Portuguese inspection composed by two inspectors and one colleague from Social Security, because we also saw that probably there was some fraud in terms of Social Security payments related to it. So the Portuguese inspectors went to the headquarters of these two temporary working companies. At the first time, the first meeting, we had one other institute, the institute that allowed the temporary work, and so they joined us in this action, in this visit. In the first company, in the headquarters of this company, I just reminded they had at least 700 workers, and when we went to visit the company, they only had 2. The other second company, more recent, open, this company had hundreds of temporary workers. It was curious to find out that on top of these two companies, in the same headquarters of these two companies, there were 2 other companies, another temporary working company and another normal company who was doing the management of the travelings, food, housing of the other 3 temporary working companies. The managers of these companies, one of them is a Brazilian woman who I understood that eventually never saw a construction site, never, but was supplying staff. And the other one was someone who worked in the construction sector, but was just a manager. Well, this showed us that this was strange, because the only link or relation between these 4 companies is one lawyer only, who was the same for the 4. The case is still open. We found several irregularities in terms of documents, both in Portugal and France. The fact that the substantial activity, that's what you need to be legal in the posting of workers. one of the conclusions that we reach is that these companies have substantial work in Portugal because they work between, they justify the legal framework or they comply with it. But my question is this really substantial activity in Portugal? Because that's what the law requires. And one of the companies, actually, one of the French colleagues understood that this was a letterbox company. And curiously, we found that in a company of co-working, but we did not meet anyone or found anyone from the company. So they shared resources, they shared spaces, but the people were not permanently working for these companies. So this was also strange. And next slide, please.
And another one.
And the next, please.
Thank you. Como eu dizia, a inspeção continua.
Well, the inspection is still on, both in Portugal and in France, but I'll finish in a second, Francesca, but before that, I'd like to refer to a second very important point of the digital data sharing. It is obvious that it is important, vital, the exchange of information between countries, between authorities. This is the future, this is the present, right now. And obviously, this exchange of information will help the authorities, certainly, because first of all, we have to trust each other. And of course, if this is authorized and if we have the protection of personal data, which have to be protected before we go anywhere. And another idea I have is that 7 platforms, what should we have for database? 27 different ones. When ELA, who is also present here, why couldn't ELA or ELA can a management of a European database which could be fed by all the EU member states? This is just a suggestion. And I'd like to finish by saying that the exchange of data and information will help, but will not certainly sort all the problems related to posted workers. And this is what we are talking about, find a solution. I cannot forget that before pandemic, in one of the visits where we were 7 European inspections and 7 trade unions and other many countries, after all the informations that we compiled in this and having the help of this database of the best in Europe, but we verified in a construction site with 4,000 workers, we saw that there were ins and outs of the workers and they were registered in this database. But it was still curious that we went away, we distanced ourselves a few meters from this construction site, from this entrance, and we verified that there were vans going in and out with several workers that did not belong to any system or the database. This was curious. This is the difference between the work which is prescribed and in the database and the real work who's happening and does not coincide what is being registered. And the labor inspectors cannot forget that, certainly, and they cannot think that data sharing is going to fix the solution for all. Thank you so much, and I'll be here to listen to you and to answer any questions if you have any.
Indeed, we apologize because the sound was not ideal, so we invite in any case to check the final report, which will include all the information that Christian just presented. And speaking about problematic aspects of posting, we will now hear the third speaker, last but not least, Miss Julia Frias, who is Development Director at Notus. For those of you who doesn't know the Notus, it's a Spanish research center that develops studies and provides technical assistance in the areas of employment, labor relations, qualifications and training, local development, poverty, social inclusion, and gender. So, Julia, please, the floor is yours.
Muy bien, muchas gracias, Francesca.
Thank you very much, Francesca. I hope that you can hear me all right. Okay, so the presentation I'll be sharing with you today stems from the presentations, or is based on presentations that we already shared in the past, even with labor inspectors. Labor inspectors themselves have shared the information and they've worked together with us. Apart from that, we've also worked with other officials, such as, for example, those who are in units that fight against international fraud. The idea was for us to see how public administrations can work together, can cooperate, and how digitation can have some benefits in that process. That is, to what extent digitation can contribute to a better cooperation across different administrations. Initially, just give me a second. I need to close the presentation.
Un segundo, por favor.
Give me a second, please.
Bien.
Okay.
Vale.
All right. So I'm going to see the state of the art, what kinds of agreements we have, what features they include, what are the digital tools that could be used for that cooperation and for that exchange of administrative data, and what are the benefits of these systems. First of all, right now in Spain, the cooperation that we have to exchange information is based on agreements that are signed between different countries. These agreements are based on the willingness of the parties and on the trust in cooperation to improve their work, to improve the administrative work. When we speak about trust and willingness, we refer to them in the framework of a deficit of information. We do not have enough information about the companies, real or not real companies on either side of the border. We also lack information about the activities of these companies, about the workers' qualifications, working hours, salaries, bonuses, etc. And we also lack information regarding social security aspects. For example, whether the workers are registered, where they have to contribute, what kind of contributions they have to make. And then there's another group of aspects or difficulties that have been identified as hindrances to this common work, which have to do with how when we're trying to estimate the contributions or salaries, we do not have enough information, and also the differences that there are in terms of bonuses or benefits. So all these things create hurdles for cooperation. Right now, we have several agreements. In Spain, we have several agreements with different countries, but if we look at the one that is most robust, is the one between Spain and Portugal. Apart from that, we also have an agreement between Spain and France. It was signed several years ago, but since 2019, it was strengthened, and we are trying to push it and make it more effective. The objectives of all the agreements signed, then we cannot say about their implementation, but initially their objectives are to establish a cooperation framework, especially within the provisions of Directive 96/71 EC. To implement this directive properly, we had to have a proper cooperation between countries. The specific objectives of these agreements are, on the one hand, to have those cooperation frameworks that are permanent, that are ongoing. They have to be reviewed annually in order to look into areas that are of relevance for all countries. For example, occupational health and safety, anything that has to do with accidents at work, work permits for non-EU citizens, verification actions with companies that have the address in the neighboring country, exchanges of information on the flows of workers, cooperation and support according to Directive 96/71 in the field of information. And then there's a second set of objectives that includes the establishment of direct communication links, both across regional authorities on both sides of the border, as well as direct communication links between the central authorities in each of the countries. Then the agreements also try to create some instruments that help sustain the agreements. The features that they include is that first, they are purely administrative agreements. And besides, these are agreements that are cross-sectorial. These agreements basically focus on an exchange of information between the different authorities. And they are, of course, based on the need for cooperation that is shared by the authorities in each of the countries. These agreements, furthermore, for their part, they also include specific tools and instruments to improve communication and data exchange across the border. Now, the digitization process of the data obtained through the agreements is what would be the goal of the information exchange. So this information exchange has to be ongoing. But we have a problem here because the digitization speed of the public administration in each of the country does not follow the same kind of speed. So when we speak about a system to exchange information across all countries, even if the system is there, then we have a problem afterwards when each of the countries has to implement it and has to use it. This is the difficulty that we find when we speak about the different speeds and the digitization process in the different countries. Right now, we have two tools. They were presented by the EU and they were supported by the different countries. And that is, on the one hand, we have the EESSI, and the other tool is the IMI. So the EESSI is an IT system that helps social security institutions across the EU to exchange information related to applicable legislation, sickness, occupational disease and accidents at work, pension and employment and family benefits. That is to say, all the aspects that are included in European legislation, they have to be coordinated across the border in terms of social security demands. Before we had EESSI, all communications were done on paper. And once the EESSI was launched, the goal is to have all these interactions online. How does it work? Well, all authorities, all social security authorities in the different countries that are engaging in the situation of posted workers have to use the system. So the social security institutions exchange all e-documents in a structured way and following an agreed protocol. This has been agreed by all countries. These documents are then channeled through the EESSI, and they're channeled to the right destination and the right institutions in the other member state. And in order to know who the right destination and the right institution is, we need to have a repository of national institutions. So one of the problems that we find is that this repository is not updated, and that is a key element for the system to work. The system is new. The first documents that were exchanged through the system was in January 2019. So the objective now is to have all the participating countries using the system. What are the advantages of the system? Well, first, we can have faster exchanges across all organizations. This has many benefits for posted workers. There's another advantage. The data is more accurate. The data that is exchanged is more accurate. Besides, this is also a tool that can help us fight fraud. This, of course, ensures a better use and a better handling of personal data. At the same time, these tools, I think that this is a very important aspect, the tool also helps us collect statistics about how the different social security systems are coordinated. And it also helps us verify the social security rights of posted workers. Definitely, the system has many advantages, but what we know is that it is not being widely used by all the member states. As I was saying, there is also another tool, another digital tool to exchange data and to exchange information is the IMI. The IMI is an electronic tool for the market, for the single market. And this helps the administrative cooperation across different administrations. And this is understood as an administration support, e-administration support, in many aspects that have to do with the internal market, the single market. So this has been developed with the support of all the different member states as a single system that goes through many different aspects. For example, things that have to do with professional qualifications, the supervision of migrations services, and anything that has to do with cross-border provision of services as established by Directive 2006-123. The idea is to expand this tool to cover other areas that are more specific to labor law. It contains the database of the different authorities involved in the day-to-day implementation of legislation, and also the different authorities that are parallel to those in another member state. And this, of course, ensures efficient communication across different authorities. This is a database that includes some questions and the FAQs, the frequently asked questions, that has been translated into different languages. This improves communication. There are as well, within this tool, there are different user profiles. We have, for example, the manager, that is those users who have the capacity to send requests, information requests on behalf of an authority. They can also generate and save reports, and to some extent they can have access to all the information that has been generated. There are other profiles such as a supervisor, basic user, etc. The reports that can be retrieved or that are obtained, submitted by some of the countries may or may not be accepted. So each of the countries receiving the information might send it back and request complementary information. So there are some deadlines. There is a time to go through the report again and to correct whatever needs to be corrected. The system has several benefits. First, it overcomes the language barrier. Users mentioned this as an important element. It also uses the same language for the exchange of information. There is more accurate data being exchanged between national authorities. Obviously, there's also a better, more secure handling of personal data. And IMI also allows us to collect data for statistical purposes, especially regarding social security issues.
Sorry, Julia.
So far,
Sí, tiene solamente 2 minutos.
you have 2 minutes left. That's
Thank
okay, I'm almost done. So this is a system that is more widely used than the previous system. And to conclude, I just wanted to mention that first, all parties agree that there's a need to cooperate, that IT tools are the best instrument for that, the best instrument to exchange information. For these tools to work, all countries must commit to the use of these tools in order to be effective, and digitization would allow more transparency, more data protection, more efficiency in the fight against fraud, faster interventions, and it would ensure compliance and also protection for posted workers. And this, of course, in turn would guarantee that the appropriate legislation is applied to posted workers. This is all I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much for your attention. And of course, if there are any questions, I will answer them later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Julia. Sorry also for having asked you to close, but unfortunately we have still quite interventions. And I know from the background, it was suggested that perhaps we don't follow the agenda. We skip the break that we had foreseen. So I will already give the floor to the moderator of the next panel. I think it's Luisa Veloso.
Yes,
okay.
Thank you, Francesca. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for all the participants and the speakers for being here. It's a pleasure to be in this session that we are closing our ISA project. So our second panel has as the main theme, the aims and role of social partners in international cooperation activities. So we will focus mainly on the social partners. And to do this discussion, we have first the communication of Jakub Kus from the National Secretariat of ZZ Budowlani. I'm sure I'm not saying this correctly, but it's a trade union from Poland. I will then pass the floor to Giacomo Virgilio, who is policy advisor of FILCA CIES-IUL, so the Italian Labor Federation of Construction, together with the trade union. And finally, we have the contribution of Valentin Nikolov, who is the executive director of the Bulgarian Construction Chamber from Bulgaria, of course. So we have 3 points of view, different, and I'm sure that are also complementary. Before giving the floor to our speakers, to whom I would like to thank again for their participation, I would also like to repeat what Francesca already told, that you can present your questions in the online in questions and answers, and we can select some of them in order that in the end we can, if we have time, to address them to our speakers. Thank you. So Jakub Kus, please. You're listening to us? Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear us? Yes.
I cannot, but maybe somebody can.
Yes, I hope.
Technical support.
Using this possibility, Luisa, thank you for introduction.
Okay, thank you.
Your pronunciation of Budowlani is excellent. Okay.
We can see you now, Jakub. Thank you.
Thank you. Szanowni Państwo, projekt...
Ladies and gentlemen, the ISA project is a special project for the trade unions that Budowlani is. Not the first one and not the last one, in cooperation with the CNCE and Fondazione Brodolini and other partners. The participation of a Polish trade union is only possible in cooperation with Polish institutions that are responsible for posting of workers in the European Union, and that is the Social Insurance Company, ZUS, and the National Labor Inspectorate. And let me take this opportunity to thank those two organizations. We also appreciate cooperation with the Polish Liaison Office in the European Labour Office, ELA. Polish social partners are interested in cooperation on international level with regard to posting of workers. We do have some experience already preceding our membership in the European Union, so before 2004, on the basis of a governmental agreement between Poland and Germany, dating back to 1991. As a matter of principle, this is not a direct form of cooperation between different administrations. This is cooperation between trade union organizations in the delegating countries and also employers' organizations. I can only talk about cooperation between trade unions because for employers, cooperation is handled by other organizations that deal with posting and associate entities that unite both companies and agencies who post workers. Budowlani, the trade union, consults our positions with regard to sharing of data and information with the European Federation of Building and Woodworkers, EFBWW. The basic aims of cooperation of our trade unions are the same as those of the European trade unions. Of course, the protection of interests of posted workers is the major aim. We want to focus on transparency and legality of the posting process and provision of reliable information about the host country. We want to ensure the same working conditions as those of the local workers. We want that employees receive the same or equal social benefits and job security, and all elements of remuneration in conformity with applicable law. It is also important that posted workers are noticed in the social security system in such a way that their insurance accounts be credited with adequate contributions. Trade unions in Poland most often defend the interests of people who are not even members of the unions, because posted workers from new European Union countries rarely associate, and they usually do so in the host country and only in case there is trouble. The world of posted workers is not ideal. If it were, we could simply share information between insurance institutions, and interventions and cooperation between would not even be necessary. But this is not the case, because posting of workers has become a business model which provides cheap labor, which is a form of predator prices or dumping on the market, which violates the principles of fair competition. I used to be a member of the EU Advisory Committee on Freedom of Movement for Workers, and posting of workers often violates respective regulations, and conflicts arise as a result of this. Poland, in contrast to Italy or Belgium, does not have party funds, such as CIES-IUL, which is coordinated by CNCE. Creating such funds required a certain legal framework, but also strong representation of employers and employees in sectoral bargaining collective agreements. Polish employers are poorly organized, and to be honest, trade unions are not the strongest either. we do not have a strong system of collective agreements, and very few handle posting of workers. So this brings us to the area which is addressed by the ESA project. In order to prevent numerous pathologies of posting, we can only count on international cooperation as part of the European Federation and bilateral cooperation with the host country, which is usually very effective and focuses on specific cases and interventions of trade unions in host countries. We provide support. We can also cooperate with the social insurance institution with regard to the insurance of posted workers and the regularity of their posting. And we cooperate with the National Labor Inspectorate with regard to infringements of labor law. Poland is still one of the major providers for European construction industry. So we are interested in cooperating both with the social insurance organization and the labor inspectorate. We want to support good exchange of data with those organizations and their counterparts in the host parties, especially in construction industry, because there is still a big room for improvement. We can do so by using our bilateral contacts. And I think this will be the most valuable effect of the ESA project. We want to learn from good practices, and we want to exchange information and enter into new agreements. We still want to improve cooperation with the Labor Inspectorate, and there is a new field for coming up, especially on the ELA platform, which is a member of our European Federation. Yet another area for cooperation will be posting of workers from third parties to Poland. Poland is no longer merely an exporter of workers. More and more, it accepts workers. It is a receiving country. And is actually an area for a separate discussion, and I hope I managed to stick within the time frame. And thank you for your attention.
Have you finished, Jakub? Thank you so much. Thank you for such.
Tak, skończyłem. Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you.
Yes, I have.
How Jakub stressed the importance of the social partners, and I will just pass the floor to Giacomo Virgilio. Here you are, Giacomo. Thank you.
Hello, Luisa. Thank you, Jakub. Thank you for the invitation. One moment, I will share my screen. All right. So greetings, everyone. I am Giacomo Virgilio, a researcher on international posting at the moment from CIES, an Italian union in the construction workers, and the former project coordinator for CNCE of ESA project and 4 other projects financed by the European Commission. Today, I'm here to discuss the background for the application of the bilateral agreements that are an emanation of the action of the social partners that Jakub mentioned before, but also the commitment of these social partners in enforcing the protection of workers and company. First of all, a brief introduction of CNCE is the Joint National Committee for Building Workers in the welfare funds for orientation, control, and coordination of these worker welfare funds, CASSEDILI. The building worker welfare funds are paritarian entities, so composed by social partners, and they are an emanation of the contractual provision. They play a major role in providing workers with an important part of the income deriving from working contract and supplementary benefits on social security and welfare plan. This means that the registration to the building fund is bound to the company observance of collective bargaining in the sector. As you can see, these are the project also mentioned before. We have started our post-lab searching the good practice around Europe, starting by this bilateral agreement. Then we moved the discussion on where the data are and if they are available with you post-lab. Then we are here in ISA project, and currently we are moving in that is about employment skill, and MX, that is about the pandemic and the posting worker situation. Our point of analysis is from the starting of 2000, where is considerably increased the number of the companies coming from other countries running private or public works in Italy. The presence of more than 8,000 foreign construction that is growing year by year on national territory is more relevant in the northern regions. The Northwest, we find more French and Spanish companies, and to a lesser extent also in the Northeast, where there are much greater number of Austria, German, and Eastern Europe companies. Vice versa, it's very common to find Italian construction companies working abroad in different European nations, in particular in Germany and France. The National Association of Building Sector, in order to solve this situation, in accordance with European trade unions and European employers organization, have placed this following objective: to avoid, of course, social dumping, to protect the building workers through the wage homogeneity, to allow the freedom of the company to participate and to work in the European territory, and to exchange information especially, and to act against irregular work, supervising the correct application of insurance, contract, and so on. According to this objective, the social partners and the CNCE started in confrontation with the respective organization of France, Germany, and Austria. And once concluded this preparatory work in 2008, the CNCE signed with Socabau, Germany, UCF for France, and BUAC for Austria, 3 bilateral agreements, which allowed the companies working in one of these 4 countries to be exempted at all from the registration in the national welfare funds, keeping their ranking in the country of origins. These conventions are today a very powerful tool for the companies to avoid unnecessary red tape or the risk to pay twice the necessary fees, and to ensure the workers a continuity in the registration in their welfare funds, and to maintain the certainty of their important benefits. For example, in Italy, we have the APE, that is a building professional seniority pay, at the maximum level is equal to a monthly salary pay. There are about 1,000 company posting workers each year from Italy, each posting at least 2-3 workers, and CNCE can certify that those are all companies in line with the due payments. The compliance is also ensured during the period of posting, as the signatory parties will inform each other about irregularities. In the last 5 years, the number of companies utilizing the bilateral agreements are growing. Therefore, the workers declared are increased by more than 40% per year, as you can see. The parties involved in the stipulation of the bilateral agreements have not only analyzed the cost of the bilateral bodies, but also the entire amount of costs foreseen by the sectoral bargaining and all the indirect costs foreseen by the state legislation, thus calculating the expenditure in terms of contribution and pay of the total work for a company of these 4 European countries. Today, this network involving 4 countries is a piece of economic European space that not only has in common an observatory on the mobility of workers and the need to give common rules on the posting of workers, of course, but above all, a homogeneous ground of contractual protection, legislative norms, coverage of the welfare state for workers. It isn't a forced but natural mobility, as it moves within 4 territories that are, as already stated, a substantially homogeneous portion of Europe. It is hoped that the social partners in the first instance should carry out a comparison study on labor costs in other countries interested in signing this agreement. And in a second phase, these same actors should find or create a body that can interface with their own in order to continue the certification of the regularity internationally over time. Starting from this experience, as said before, we have moved our analysis from post-lab project to EU post-lab project and then to ISA project today. The main point of national interest in the study of the phenomenon in which CNCE and the social partners are involved is the fight against illusion, as the phenomenon we have encountered most is the posting of workers perpetrated with the aim of applying wages below the minimum contractual level and the very delicate discourse of the registration within the building welfare funds, the Cassa, which although configured as a private body born from the contractual provision, is recognized as mandatory by law. And as it is of public relevance, guarantees part of the remuneration to the workers, Christmas bonuses, holiday pay, professional seniority pay mentioned before, and so on. And it is a member together with the other two public institutions in Italy, INPS and INAIL, insurance and pension, for the regularity check in contribution payments, mandatory for access to tenders, payments, public or private works. Regarding construction, the issue of posting is very followed and monitored by social partners, because when we talk about posting in this specific sector, it appears as a movement of entire teams of workers who move freely around the territory, and then it increases the statistical risk of evasion. The national collective agreement of the construction sector stipulated by the social partners, in the construction sector we are industry, cooperatives, crafts, small and medium-sized enterprises, sets the salary at minimum wages, to which must be added then in Italy the second level, which is contracted provincially in the individual Italian national territories. This is to emphasize that what is discussed in the law provision on the posting of workers about category contracts in Italy, this second level of bargaining is also envisaged, which has an important weight in the definition of the remuneration. Regarding the political position of the social partners in the construction sector, contrary to numerous other examples, there always will be a strong alignment of action, since both the unions and the employers' organization have always agreed on the importance of protecting posted workers in order to avoid social dumping and unfair competition. An important issue.
Giacomo, 2 minutes, okay?
Yeah, I'm concluding.
Thank you.
An important issue is that on this aspect, there is often a gap between national politics, which then sit in European Parliament, and the social partners. This one, many times I'm found difficult to pass position, which are those of the subjects actually closer to the phenomenon of posting, to report the critical points on the contractual application than in Europe. So thank you for the listening, and sorry if I take too long.
Thank you, Giacomo. You didn't take too long. It's perfect. So thank you for your presentation. I think it's also interesting what Giacomo was mentioning, that various of us who are here and our institutions have been participating in projects that are connected with each other, and it's very important to keep on discussing these issues. So finally, I will give the floor to Valentin Nikolov. Valentin? Thank you.
The role of the social partners in cross-border cooperation is essential to recognize problems related to mobility of people and services in a modern globalized economy. Such international partnerships have the potential to find a solution to various cross-border challenges by analyzing them from the point of view of all stakeholders, And they can also give a strong push for changes and improvements in international practices and regulation. It is during extraordinary times, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, that the whole world is struggling with, the intervention of European social partners, the effective dialogue between them, and joint initiatives become more and more relevant. This crisis shed light to significant issues, and they also were even deepened, and they are not only of economic and financial nature, but of social nature as well. One of them is in the area of posting workers. It became more acute and came to the foreground in many European countries, both in construction business, but in other important sectors. The chronic deficit of construction workers and practitioners in practically in all EU member states is a factor that for distorting processes. This trend is strengthening, and if it is not harnessed, it may become a source of more acute problems and contradictions between companies, construction businesses, and countries. There is a problem of related to improper use
Sorry, could you turn on your image, please? We can't see you.
Тази тенденция е особено опасна от гледна точка на подкопаване на моралните устои на Европейския съюз и поставянето на препятствия пред неговото развитие. Предизвикателствата, свързани с мобилността на хора, неравностойното заплащане на труда и изпълнението на проекти за строителство в български фирми в чужбина не са нови.
Just a second.
Ситуацията с пандемията обаче добави нови трудности.
Just a second. There are two things.
Can I please сериозен тласък и мотивация на Камарата на строителите в България да предприеме мерки за справяне на проблема, черпейки от опита на други европейски държави.
The gentleman is not he does not have his headset on.
Can I just jump in for a while? For some audio problems, can we ask the Bulgarian team to switch your channel to Bulgarian, where the gentleman is speaking, to avoid some double audio, please?
All right. Should we start from the scratch?
No, from a few sentences before, please.
Okay.
Sorry for this.
Sorry for the interruption.
We're trying to solve this.
За съжаление, тази тенденция се засилва и ако не...
Unfortunately, this trend is becoming more acute, and if it is not harnessed, it may become a source of more acute problems and contradictions between companies, construction sectors, and certain countries. There is a problem of related to improper use of information or abusing the deficit of information, and it may result in harming the posted worker, be it a natural person or company. This trend may jeopardize and undermine the moral grounds and foundations of the European Union and make obstacles to its development. Challenges related to the mobility of people, unequal payment and implementation of construction projects by Bulgarian companies abroad are not anything new. They, however, became more serious over the years, and the pandemic brought about additional difficulties. This motivated the construction chamber in Bulgaria to take other measures to handle the problem, the issue, drawing on the experience of other European countries by analyzing the results and the findings from the other two European projects related to posted workers in the construction sector, EU PostLab and ISA, thanks to which we are attending this intriguing international conference. We realized that unlike other European countries, Bulgaria does not have a system for tracing or following up on various aspects of posting construction workers. And the system of feedback is extremely important to reduce the share of shadow economy and minimize discrimination and improve smooth implementation of construction projects abroad. As we reviewed various systems for monitoring posted workers presented by the two European projects, we decided to draw on and adjust the Portuguese system for monitoring and oversight. The reason is that, on the one hand, just like Bulgaria, Portugal comes among the first countries to post workers within the EU. On the other hand, the analysis indicated that the Portuguese practices in relation to collection of information about posted workers has been extremely successful with relation to cooperation at intergovernmental and international level. Thanks to our participation in ISA, we have made successful contact with the Portuguese AECTE Inspectorate and to lay the foundations of a fruitful international cooperation for exchange of good practices. We already had our first initial virtual meeting, and in April we will have a wider meeting, and during which various organizations related to involved in posting of workers participated in this meeting. In the meantime, at the national level, the Bulgarian construction chamber joint effort with the National Revenue Agency, which is in charge of issuing A1 forms in Bulgaria, and we carried out a survey of the conditions for carrying out construction projects and posting workers within the EU. The results of this survey will be shared within ISA, and they will be proposed. They will be used for adjusting the Portuguese system to the Bulgarian conditions. The resolving of these issues requires the attention of the whole society, of the Bulgarian and of the European Union society, because we are one family looking into the future. Without this joint cooperation, we could not have been successful, and we are extremely appreciative of the support of our international partners. Let me use this opportunity on behalf of the chamber, of the construction chamber in Bulgaria, to thank the project coordinator Feliciano, who supported us unconditionally and helped us in getting in contact with the Portuguese ACT. I would like to thank the Portuguese colleagues who responded very kindly to our appeal for cooperation and for assistance, and will help us in building an efficient system for monitoring of posting of workers. It was extremely pleasant for us to be ISA's partners, and I hope that we will continue to work together successfully. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Valentin Nikolov. So thank you all our three participations in this session. Very important and useful to have the view from the social partners. So as we are ahead of time and I didn't receive any questions from the audience, I will give the floor to Frédéric Tourlan to continue with the conference. Thank you.
Bonjour à tous. Je n'ai pas encore l'accès à la vidéo, alors je laisse l'équipe technique me mettre en vidéo.
Hi everyone. Unfortunately, you cannot see me yet. But there I am. So thank you. I'm very pleased to be here with you today. I'm Frédéric Turland, one of the partners of the project for France. I'm the director of IR Share. So IR Share is a structure which is the national correspondent for Eurofund, which is the Organization for the Improvement of Living Conditions and Work. So far we've assessed the situation and we have understood the different cooperation agreements that exist in labor inspection, but also when it comes to the sectoral approach. And like I said several times this afternoon, we've heard that there are many expectations. You expect us to increase cooperation. This also targets new structures in the EU, which is European Authority for Labor. So you expect such an authority to be implemented. So of course, we don't have much authority because so far we cannot impose a lot. But this authority is there to create cooperation, to provide the member states with the necessary instruments to do foster cooperation. And I mean here cooperation with the member states and other stakeholders. Okay, so this is what is expected by many of you. Note taken. And so we will now listen to different speakers who will explain what can be done to improve the coordination between the different stakeholders. I will give the floor to Malcolm Skikluna from Labor Mobility at ELA. Malcolm, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Frederick, and of you. And I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this very interesting conference, which I've been hearing since almost the beginning. So given that this is the first time which I am addressing this group, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Malcolm Skikluna. I'm originally from Malta. And I just joined the European Labour Authority exactly on the 1st of January of this year. So I'm still a new employee of the authority, but in that case, even the authority is practically new. Before joining the authority, I was for 3 years in the European Commission as a seconded national expert. And I was specifically in the DG Employment, the unit dealing with Social Security coordination. And before that, I was employed in the Maltese Public Service, where in 2003, I was also director responsible for international relations in the Social Security area. And now, if you allow me, I would like to share with you my screen because I prepared a few slides. I hope I will manage to do this. I hope it is working. So the topic on which I have been asked to address today is the strengthening of cooperation between the member states and the role and activities of ELA. And I will also be giving you an overview of some of the activities which were carried out and which contributed towards stronger cooperation between the member states. Starting with the mission and vision of the European Labour Authority. So the European Labour Authority was established to help strengthen fairness and trust in the internal market. And its main mission is to assist member states and the Commission in their effective application and enforcement of EU labour mobility law and the coordination of social security systems. When ELA was established, the legislators were aiming at addressing a number of challenges, and these were the enforcement of cross-border rules, improving the information provided to citizens and employers, also overcoming the artificial fragmentation of EU law related to labor mobility, and finally also, which is the topic of today's seminar, is this administrative cooperation to solve daily practical problems. And these challenges were enshrined in the regulation establishing the European Labour Authority. So the regulation lays down 4 objectives, and one of which is, in effect, the the promotion of cooperation, that is to strengthen cooperation between member states in enforcing EU law, including concerted and joint inspections. Focusing on cooperation, what could ELA do to improve and support cooperation between member states? So one of the 7 tasks which ELA has been entrusted is to facilitate the cooperation and acceleration of exchange of information between member states and support their effective compliance with cooperation obligations, including on information exchange. To that end, Article 7 of the regulation provides that ELA shall, upon request of one or more member states, so ELA will be acting upon the request of the member states, support in identifying the relevant contact points. So if a member state needs to contact another and wants to know who is the contact person or institution in the other member states, it can ask ELA to identify this, but also to facilitate the follow-up to requests and information exchanges between the national authorities. We can also, member states can also ask ELA to facilitate and support cross-border enforcement procedures relating to fines and penalties, and also to provide information to support the member state consent in the effective application of the union law. Having said that, if the request from the member state does not lead to the resolution of the request, ELA is obliged under the regulation to report to the Commission twice a year about unresolved requests between the member states, and we could also consider to refer those for mediation. I remind that mediation is also a task of ELA, so any request which is sent to ELA where the member states cannot reach an agreement can also be mediated by the authority itself. This Article 7 of the regulation also tasks ELA with the disseminating of best practices. I heard today in the seminar that some speakers actually referred to this, and also to promote the use of electronic tools and procedures for messages exchange between the national authority, including possibly with the use of the internal market information system, the IMI system. So this is basically the mandate given to ELA in the area of cooperation between the member states by the legislator by means of the regulation in Article 7. So what added value will ELA bring to the picture, to the area? And basically, ELA aims to provide a permanent EU structure to support member states through various new tools and procedures by, for example, improved cooperation and acceleration of exchange of information between member states. We have also a network of national liaison officers, one from each member states, which are housed within ELA, who are available for answering questions from member states and to speed up exchanges. We can also provide logistical and technical support, including translation and interpretation services, and we can also help with the organization of concerted and joint inspections. I heard also today in the seminar that some of you also participated in these inspections. We can also help with capacity building, the provision of guidelines, best practices, training, and awareness raising campaigns. As I already stated, we can also mediate in case of disputes between member states on the provision of EU law related to labor mobility, and we can also support cooperation in tackling undeclared work. As regards examples of our activities in 2020, so throughout 2020, the European Labour Authority has undergone an important growing phase with progress on all dimensions. However, the priority activities were delivered while others were in preparatory stage. And at the same time, internal systems and processes were being gradually put in place. You have to understand that ELA was established towards the end of 2019, so obviously we could not deliver to to the full extent across all the areas which ELA will be expected to deliver on once it reaches full speed. Notable successes included the coordination and participation in 5 pilot inspections, where we could already test the tools and procedures for the concerted and joint inspections which were adopted in December. We also launched the ELA translation facility that already covered over 100 translation requests for member states' websites. We organized a road transport workshop with over 150 participants from national competent authorities, sectoral social partners, and the enforcement organization and the Commission. Finally, we also led alongside the European Platform for Tackling Undeclared Work, the EU Forward for Fair Work campaign, and among many other important activities, ELA also prepared for the transfer of the European Coordination Office of the EURES. As regards the work already carried out this year in Q1, I can mention 5 initiatives on which we are currently working. The first one being the mapping exercise on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And with the help of our network of national liaison officers, but also with the input from the social partners and the stakeholder group, ELA has been looking into the challenges brought by the pandemic as identified by the member states and the social partners. And we sent out a questionnaire through the NLOs where we were collecting the information how ELA can help the member states with the effects of the pandemic. This mapping exercise is bringing up suggestions on the way forward and the role and place for ELA in contributing to mitigate the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, which in many ways highlighted the existing structural problems faced by the EU labour mobility. This will also prove useful for ELA itself when deciding on its work program for next year and also the years after. So we take inspiration from this COVID-19 mapping exercise to also give direction to our future action. Going now to another initiative, which is the translation facility. So ELA set up a translation facility to support the translation of content of national official websites, providing information on labour mobility and social security coordination. So between July and December of last year, 108 documents were translated into 18 different languages, as well as a number of different non-EU languages, such as Russian, such as the Russian language. Given the large uptake of this facility and the extent of its support, the budget for the translation facility was doubled for this year. This means that this year we have around €500,000 for translations, which translates itself to around €18,500 per member state, allocated to each member state to use for the translation of national web pages on labour mobility and social security coordination. And we hope that the member states will make use of this facility also to improve the accessibility and the information which is provided in a multi-language for the benefit of the workers. The translation facility currently is open for member states only, and usually requests come from the relevant ministries, such as the national labour ministries, but also, for example, from labour inspectorates. I will go now to the information task, and the central activity for 2021 will be to respond to the calls of the Council, the European Parliament, and the Commission to undertake action to address challenges relating to working conditions of cross-border seasonal workers, also in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. For this reason, this year, an action plan on seasonal workers was launched by ELA, which is composed of two main streams of action. One of them is an awareness-raising campaign, and secondly is a plan to support the enforcement of labour mobility legislation. This also links to our next activity, which is the inspections, and last month, we encouraged and offered our support and assistance to national labor inspectorates in launching or participating in a cross-border concerted or joint inspection. ELA is supporting in providing the detailed tools and procedures such as templates, case descriptions, model agreements, inspections, and so we take care of all the necessary documentation which is required. And in February and March, so this month, we have sent letters to 15 member states proposing that they take part in a concerted or joint inspection in the framework of this action plan on seasonal workers. The 15 member states were selected among those where our analysis shows that seasonal workflows are most prominent, including the both countries of origin and of destination. But obviously, if any other member states are interested, they were also invited to organize such an inspection with the coordination and support of ELA. And finally, on mediation, I mentioned mediation previously. This year, ELA started also its activity in the field of mediation, and we focused mainly on two strengths. We set up a working group with experts to advise ELA on how its mediation procedure should be put in place. And we also started our discussions with the Administrative Commission on the coordination of Social Security in order to conclude a cooperation agreement as required by the regulation. So the first meeting of the working group took at the end of February, and the first meeting with the Administrative Commission took place only about 2 weeks ago. Finally, I want to provide you with some small statistics on our translation facility. So in 2020, we received 37 requests from 21 member states for a total number of 108 documents to be translated. And the requests were made for translating into 18 different EU languages, with English as most popular destination language. So 63 out of the 108 documents were to be translated in English, followed by Bulgarian 19 documents and Polish 18 documents. And as I said, 7 requests were made specifically into non-EU languages, with Russian being the most popular language. As regards the area of the documents, 62 documents were submitted in the area of posting of workers, 24 documents on social security, 10 documents on free movement, and 12 documents on other topics. I mean, this is all from my side, given that the time, I think, already overpassed the 10 minutes. What I would like to conclude with is that ELA is here to help and to continue increasing the cooperation. However, we have to also be a bit realistic, because we are currently in our build-up phase, and our operational capacity is somehow limited. For example, at the moment, we are only like at around 25 to 30% of our operational capacity, which will reach the 100% in the year 2024. However, as I have tried to show you, we have already started leaving our footprint in strengthening the access to information, supporting compliance, and also finally cooperation between the member states. Thank you for your attention, and I will now give the floor back to Frederic, and I will stop sharing my presentation.
Thank you, Malcolm. Merci beaucoup, Malcolm, pour cette présentation.
All right, Malcolm, thank you for this presentation. We now understand that you have strong expectations, and we know that your agency is quite new, so it takes time to implement it all and to start up it, to boost it. So we expect reactions from the trade unions and social partners, and we know that they expect a lot from you. You have shown your ambitions, but you are currently implementing and starting. You're still booting your system.
Yeah.
So now we'll move on. Thank you, Malcolm. We'll move on to the next speakers. We spoke about the sector funds before. We spoke about the management of paid holidays, and we heard Giacomo, who spoke about the different agreements that had been signed between different authorities, SNCE or ECF in France and others, also Cabot. We now listen to Dana Schaffer for Sokabau. The objective is not to say what is in these agreements, because we know that, but she will explain how these entities work at the sectoral level, at the European level too, and how these groups can go beyond the cooperation agreements that have been signed and what they can do in the future, or today even, to improve cooperation with other stakeholders when it comes to the situation that we know with posting of workers. So, Madam, you have the floor.
C'est à toi.
You have the floor, Dana.
You're on mute, Dana.
So at least you could see me. Thank you, Frederick, for the floor. And thank you also for inviting me as a speaker for this conference and giving you the opportunity to share some insights from Sokabau with you. Now I would like to share my screen with you. And let me see. Here you go. I hope you see everything. So let me talk to the role of the sectoral funds, in particular Sokabau in Germany as a sectoral fund for the construction industry. As you were introducing, we are as sectoral fund trying to fix some specific features of the construction industry, like the bad weather payments or the frequent change of employers. In particular, we would like to make the leave transported from one employer to the other, so that the workers also have the chance to have to share the holidays in total. We also try to find the lack of specialists in the construction industry, and try to integrate the large number of small and medium-sized enterprises in the construction industry. The competition in the construction sector is not only there on national level, but even more on international level. And therefore, the construction industry is one of the branches with a very high number of posted workers. So, who don't know Sokabau? Sokabau is the sectoral fund, and it's only a brand name for two legal institutions, the ULAG and the ZBK. On the one hand, we are dealing with the paid leave and the vocational training, and on the other hand, with the pension fund. Behind this, you see there are the social partners, like the employers' organization for the industry and for the handcraft, as well as the trade union. Currently, we offer three social fund systems. One is the pay, and this is the one I will have a closer look later in the presentation with you. Furthermore, we have a vocational training scheme and the occupational pension scheme. These are schemes only for national German employers and employees in the construction industry. The participation in these schemes is mandatory if the employer employs blue-collar workers that mainly perform construction activities. So we don't take the turnover per year, but the the working hours within the construction industry. As you already heard, there are some agreements with the compared institutions. So Sokabau agreed that there is the Austrian institution like the BUAG, the Belgian, the French, the Danish, and the Italian CNCE, as long as employers participate in these schemes, they can continue participating even though they are posting workers to Germany. So the contributions are in the same height, so it's accepted to be compared. The legal basis is the Posting of Workers Directive, and even so, generally, in principle, the law of the home country applies. Minimum working conditions in the country of sending need to be applied. This is in particular the minimum paid annual holidays, the paid leave, the maximum working period and the minimum rest periods, the minimum rates of pay, and further benefits, health and safety and hygiene at work, in particular important as long as the corona pandemic is all over with us, and certain conditions of accommodation. These working conditions are regulated in collective agreements. So Sokabau in figures, in 2020, there were about 85,000 blue-collar workers posted from European and non-European countries to Germany, and there were about 4,400 posting companies. The work Sokabau does is, apart from securing equal labor and competition standards, is also to control whether the minimum wages are paid, and to support and have an exchange with the German labor and custom authorities. The leave scheme itself works that the employer who sends a worker to Germany contributes to a Sokabau as long as the worker is entitled to get 1 day of holidays. After 12 days of working, the worker is allowed to take 1 day of holidays. So the employer needs to notify the gross wage and the working days with Sokabau. In case the worker changes the employer, he can continue taking his leave, and the employer only pays for the working time, contributions for the working time the worker was employed with him. It's possible to get a refund of these holiday payments as long as the employer grants holidays to the worker during the posting. This, in fact, happens in some cases, but very often it's that the worker applies for a holiday payment, which is the allowance in lieu of leave or the compensation. So there are two possibilities for the worker to apply for holiday payments. And since, from our point of view, not only the minimum wages are important for the competition, but also the non-wage costs, for example, the taxes and the contributions to Social Security, we tried to extend our field of action also to having agreements with foreign Social Security systems. In case the worker applies for the allowance in lieu of leave, so one possibility to get the refund of the holiday payment, we are obliged to reduce taxes and Social Security contributions. And for the benefit of the worker, we would like to transfer this money to the foreign Social Security system. In 2019, we had an agreement with the Polish social security institution, the SUS, and therefore we created an agreement. And if you expect me to disclose your secrets, I have to disappoint you. It's only describing what we exchange. So we exchanged a list with the employer's name and the employee's name who applied for the allowance in lieu of leave for the holiday payment. And we also tried to identify the national registration number of the employee and the employer. And the SUS obligation is also to complete the registration number to verify the tax and data and give necessary informations for this identification of the employer and the employee. The SUS also sees whether there is an obligation to pay social security contributions. This agreement now runs for more than a year, and we already transferred social security payments month by month. After Poland, we like to give Romania the chance to have a social security agreement for the direct transfer. And sorry, just some days ago, we had a video conference to get into the discussions on a further agreement with Romanian Federal Ministry for Labor and also the German Ministry for Labor. And we agreed on setting up a working group on the transfer of non-wage labor costs, which are social security contributions. Thank you for giving me the chance to introduce you and give you some insights on what SOCABAU does and what sectoral funds can do. If there are any questions, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dana, for your presentation and the new perspective of cooperation, mainly with Polish social security. I'm not sure we have time for a question. I just check in the chat if Feliciano allowed me to ask for a question. So if you have 1 or 2 minutes, Feliciano, you can send me a message in the chat. If not, maybe we can have time just after the round table, because we have also to ask the point of view of the European social partners. So thank you again, Dana, and stay with us if you can, if there's some question after the round table. We need to ask also to the European social partners their view about cooperation, administrative cooperation, if they're expecting more such cooperation. And we have 2 representatives of the European social partners today with us. Piero Petrucco from the FIEC, so the employers organization, and Marco Benatti from the Federation of the trade union side, the European Trade Union for Workers. So maybe Piero can start. Yeah.
Sì, non mi si avvia il video però, è impossibile avere il video perché me l'avete oscurato voi. Io posso iniziare, ma ecco, perfetto.
You can start your video yourself, yeah.
Buonasera a tutti, grazie per averci invitato in qualità di rappresentanti di ANCE e nel mio caso anche della FIEC, quindi della Federazione Europea delle Costruzioni. Il tema della cooperazione amministrativa e anche in generale delle regole mutue quando i nostri lavoratori lavorano nei diversi stati della comunità è un tema molto importante per noi imprese. È evidente che dobbiamo tener conto del problema della lotta al dumping sociale, considerando le differenze che ci sono ancora tra i diversi paesi europei e le diversi contratti e diverse esigenze. Quindi riteniamo che come parti sociali noi insieme al sindacato, abbiamo davvero un ruolo importante per gestire questa situazione. E in questo contesto gli accordi bilaterali...
Piero, sorry, Piero, there's no interpretation in English, so please wait a few seconds.
Sorry.
Our English colleagues have no interpretation into English. So Judith.
Adriano, can you check your channel, please? We can't hear you.
So just
it's me. Can you hear me?
Fine now. Sorry.
Yes.
Can you please go on?
Okay. Okay. Piero, it's okay.
Appunto, gli accordi bilaterali, dicevo, sono uno strumento molto importante. Quando questo non funziona bene, e qui parlo dal punto di vista delle imprese, ma anche dei lavoratori, le cose si complicano molto. Abbiamo appena ascoltato la relazione della Socabau. Mi è capitato più volte di andare con un nostro personale italiano in Germania. In virtù di questi accordi, come è stato prima detto.
Piero, I'm sorry, I will again interrupt you.
Devo parlare più piano.
Sì.
I'm not used to have a translation.
Can you hear me? 1, 2, 3, testing. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you in English, yes.
Great, sorry.
It works now?
I'm ready, yep.
Okay, Piero, it's fine. Sorry for the new interruption.
When we have this agreement, this is very convenient because through a simple administrative document, workers have no problems in maintaining their social security rights and contributions, and employers on the other side don't have to deal with different rules. When these agreements, when these bilateral agreements do not exist, this may lead to very complex situations, and I'd like to make an example. This is what happens between Italy and Denmark. The lack of agreements actually obliges Italian companies to hire their employees directly complying with the Danish agreement. And this is a problem for workers because their continuity in social security affiliation is disrupted, and then companies have to deal with burdensome bureaucracy they're not familiar with. It's very difficult to overcome these problems in the absence of agreement. Luckily enough, these agreements do exist in many countries, for instance, France, or Austria, or Germany. And therefore, this is extremely important for both companies and workers, so that they can work in the European member states, in the different European member states. Because without these agreements, the mobility of workers in the building sector is really compromised or becomes much more difficult. As I said before, in order to avoid social dumping, it's also important to have rules that encourage the compliance with agreements and laws in the different states, because otherwise we have the problem of unfair competition. Again, the role played by social partners is essential. I'd like to close by mentioning one more thing. all the things we're talking about can be really supported by the digitalization process that is occurring more and more rapidly. And as an entrepreneurs association, we really rely on digitalization due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We have had to take a leap forward in digitalization, but in public administration and also in our systems, it was not always possible to be really updated and to be good enough. So I hope that we will be being heavily committed in digitalization, because this will be a decisive factor in order to have a free system allowing our companies and our workers to work in the different countries without having to deal with excessive red tape and complications. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Piero, for this crystal clear presentation. I think that the support by employers to such systems will make the life of companies easier and will make the life of employees easier. And you're launching a call for more digitalization. It is true that in some agreements, well, some agreements date back to many, many years ago, to the 90s or to the end of the 90s. At the time, we had no Zoom, no Teams, less digital tools than we have today. So it is clear that we need to move to the next step of digitalization to make such exchanges even easier than they are today. I now give the floor to your counterpart at EFBWW, and we will see with Marco what are the assets of cooperation and how we can even improve further such cooperation in the future. Marco, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. I can't activate the video, but
well, I think our technical
we'll send the message.
will. That's okay.
The message. So, good evening to everybody. I'm Marco Benatti. I'm in charge of the International Policies Department of FILCA CIES-IUL. I thank the CNCE, Casse Dili, and all the partners. And I thank you all for giving me the possibility to participate to this conference. I think all contributions and interventions are showing very clearly that we are converging towards a common vision. So there is an attention on a positive detachment of workers in the various countries of the EU. This is an objective. This is a mode of fostering mobility of citizens around Europe. But as we know, this mechanism is unfortunately used to do social dumping, to carry out unequal competition practices and more. Now, on Italy, very quickly, the Labor Inspectorate has made a report in 1219, and there is one irregularity out of 200 cases that concern international detachment of workers. But unfortunately, there are more open cases of irregularity that have grown up from 112 to 146 in the whole territory in Italy. That's what we acknowledged. So there are difficulties, it is clear. But we said, and I agree with that, we need to reinforce agreements between social partners at European for what concerns exchange of information and opinions, and even bilateral agreements, of course. And especially, I share what has been said, and we need to review and perhaps to reshape the agreements that we already have, because this is a new phase for all of us. There will be new investments also in the construction sector and in many sectors. We are living in new times, so we need now a new generation of this sort of agreements. And I think this is important if we take on board and we bear in mind one point. We need feedbacks from the place where the work is carried out in the host countries. So it is useful to maintain, for instance, the professional qualifications between countries. And it is useful, of course, that the sending countries state that very clearly, but we need to check and double check the working conditions where work is actually taking place, be it in Italy or be it in foreign countries where Italian workers are. So let's use these the bilateral agreements. We need to improve them because they can be a barrier to transparency. We need to foster transparency and equal competition among companies. I conclude by saying, by giving a practical example. Together with the Construction Federation in Italy, we have signed an agreement. And by this agreement and through this, we will enforce the controls. And the hours, for instance, performed by the workers with regard to the whole construction project. You see, so we fully share among social partners the urge to reinforce the need on the working hours that are declared for each and every individual worker. It is very important to gather these informations. And I do think that this is a crucial aspect, and we could enlarge it at the European level by exchanging the working hours that are carried out by the workers. We have many cases in our country, and we see that very often are declared the working hours inferior to the actual carried out, and that's why they are underpaid. So we need to reinforce the control. One lever, one mechanism is to see the working hours compared to the contributions paid, for instance. That's what we acknowledged for workers that came to Italy from third countries. And a final element, a final aspect that we could consider for the future, the training on safety and security. Okay, this is important. We know this is a cost for the companies, but this is a fundamental right of the workers. On this, we should fine-tune an international exchange of informations on certification, stating that workers have followed a training on safety and security. We here too have met with difficulties concerning detached workers because we saw that they hadn't had the necessary basic training with risks, inherent risks to safety and security. And that means that director of works, for instance, has to be the person in charge, responsible for possible infringements. This is something I think we have to work on in the future. Thank you very much again for your availability, for your invitation, and I wish you good work. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Marco Benatti, pour vos...
Thank you very much, Marco, for your reflections. Indeed, better protecting workers when they're posted in another member state and giving them proper social protection is key, as well as it is key to provide for security, safety and security trainings. And I think that cooperation is not enough when there are insufficient follow-up and controls. So major cooperation and strengthening the control capacity of the host country in order to avoid exploitation of workers is key. Once again, thank you, Marco, for your contribution. We are now coming to the end of our roundtable. I don't see any questions in the chat box, so I will hand over to Feliciano for the concluding remarks. Thank you for your participation, and thank you for inviting me to facilitate the roundtable.
Thanks, Frederick. The floor is actually for Mr. Giovanni Carapella from CNCE.
Posso?
May I? Good evening to everybody. Good evening.
Posso parlare?
May I speak? Yes, you may. Right. Good evening. First of all,
for the partner of ISA project, the meeting is not over after my conclusion. Please stay connected for a few more minutes for a short briefing. Allora, vado a parlare in italiano per le conclusioni di questo meeting.
Now I will speak in Italian. I will speak Italian, and first of all, thank you to all the contributors, speakers, the social partners, Mr. Petrucco, those who have represented the social partners at the Italian and European level. CNCE has followed this seminar, and we were numerous. We were 20. I'd like to thank also the Commission representatives that have believed in our work and have assisted us all along this project. What we talked about today is one of the key components of the economic space in Europe, and it's very important. This deals with the roots of our identity, and we acknowledge this during this pandemic when our freedom of movement was limited. Now, this happened, this pandemic happened, and now today, by the way, today we put the flag at mid-height because 18 March it has been declared the National Day of people that were prey of the COVID-19. So it is very important to deal with the future of the Homus economicus. And we are working in parallel with ISA with another European project named YES. Y-E-S. This project tackles some specific issues, that Mr. Petrucco and Mr. Benatti talked about on workers' mobility, and in particular of the youth, of the young workers and the young workers that are under apprenticeship. Many workers left Italy and in the last quarter of the 2020 and of these first months went to other countries of Europe for work. And given this data, we decided to reflect upon the situation. The pandemic is slowing down, nevertheless, the mobility of the citizens, now the workers, but as soon as the health conditions improve, people begin to move again and go again abroad. Why? Because we live in a common European economic space. As we know, there are rules, there are easy to implement, to apply, if there are agreements that are struck among different countries. So in the future, we will base ourselves not only on bilateral agreements, but also on multilateral agreements in order to ease the flow of information on workers and companies. I hope you are hearing me, because I don't have any feedback. Can you hear me?
Yes, Giovanni.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you. No problem. No worries. Now, the debate we had today was very interesting. It was the debate at the end of our project. And I'm saying this to the Italian participants. Next week, we will have the possibility within the Fondazione Brodolini to reflect even more on all these topics. But I would like to highlight some key words here. Challenge, practice, cooperation agreements, data linked to digitalization, social dumping, decent work. Now, the whole topic of mobility of workers and companies revolved around these few key words. We know that there are big companies like the one of Mr. Petrucco that move many workers that are very used to working abroad in other countries rather than Italy. But there are also many smaller, more specialistic companies, and I'd like to thank Dana Schaefer of Socabao in that respect, that find their place in the sun in other markets, because they have some professionalism and their workers are highly qualified. Now, all these companies, all these young workers that compose 20%, sometimes even 25% of the whole of the workers that we send abroad are young and are doing an apprenticeship. Well, they all need clear rules, lean procedures, yes, controls and checks, but we do not need obstacles. We just need to stay within the legality. This is linked to the citizenship right of the citizens and the serious companies and of the workers that ask for decent work. The ISA project has been an opportunity to think about these common rules, and the final outcome will, we hope, advance policies on sectoral dialogue on this sector at the European level and at the national level. But we hope that the outcome of this project will pave the way for more agreements among countries on top of the already existing agreements between the CNCE and Socabao, or the agreements between Portugal and France and Germany and Poland. So we will build upon these examples. Thank you specifically to Malcolm Scicluna and Filippo Pancaldi that has followed us and all along the project in order to research more and more. We, as you know now, the European Commission has approved another project. The project is named MX. It will start in the next days and is a sort of follow-up of the ISE project, because it will deal with issues that emerged today, the mobility in post-pandemic times. It will be a pleasure and an honor to share this research work with all of you that have been present today. And I take this opportunity to thank you again. We hope to host you in Italy soon in one of the following meetings that we will have. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep up the good job. Bye-bye.